Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. If you are joining for the first time, I appreciate your time. It is important to know that the current back and forth between the United States of America and the country of South Africa is not going anywhere soon. The South African government has come out clear. Officials are saying that, actually denying that they have actually sent any official delegation to the country of the United States. Why is this important? It is important because in the past couple of weeks, we've seen the back and forth between the United States of America and the country of South Africa. Make no mistake, South Africa is a major economic regards its relationship with the United States of America. South Africa and the United States trade in billions. These two countries have strategic position that we all are seeing so far. It is important to note that the South African officials have come out clear and stated that they are not aware with regards to any particular delegation, that if there should be a delegation to the United States of America, that the government would officially pick out or single out important officials, ministers of portfolio that will travel to the United States to have detailed conversation with regards to their particular position. However, South Africa has said that it's not going to be sending a delegation to explain itself to the US government. The current United States of America's government, according to South African officials, that it is not properly formed, that the Trump administration has not filled out complete position in the United States. For that reason, it will be difficult for South Africa's counterpart to meet together and talk on those strategic issues that are important.
South Africa continues to try and address strained relations between itself and the United States President Donald Trump's administration. Pretoria reported to have sent a delegation to Washington in a bid to mend diplomatic ties. Let's get more detail now. Presidency spokesperson Vincent Magwenya joining us this evening. Mr. Magwenya, good evening to you and thanks for your time. Let's start with a confirmation that indeed a delegation has gone to Washington and who may be leading the envoys.
No, Koli, unfortunately, there is no delegation that has been dispatched by the president, nor by the government. Your correspondent in Washington, Simon Marks, asked me about this yesterday, and I did confirm with him that there's been no such delegation that has been confirmed or dispatched, rather, by the president. What we've said on record is that whilst we would like to send a government delegation to Washington, the timing is not ideal at the moment for a couple of reasons. One being mainly the fact that there are still vacancies within the Trump administration in the areas of decision-making and influence that interface with African affairs, and that will normally interface with us in the normal course of managing diplomatic relations. Secondly, we've said whilst we will not entertain engaging over what we call megaphone diplomacy, we remain open in engaging with the Trump administration and, more importantly, building what will be a mutually beneficial trade, political, and diplomatic relationship. But the timing as things stand is not ideal at all for the president to dispatch such a delegation. Only when the environment is deemed to be conducive that we can dispatch such a delegation.
Yeah.
South Africa is a major player in the continent of Africa and the global south. South Africa has a huge voice. This particular relationship is not going anywhere soon. There will be ways that need to be amended, work together, figure out solution. But at the moment, South African officials are saying that they have not, and they have no idea of whoever is talking on their behalf in the United States. Whatever delegation travels there, officials of the administration are coming out clear that once the government is ready, once they have a clear position, there will be talks, no doubt, in the future. These two partners cannot silence each other because there's just too much in the making. The two countries cannot leave each other in terms of trade. Billions of US dollars in the past 24 months. If we look at data in 2023, 2024, South Africa, to an extent, has come out to reject the United States accusation in a number of areas. However, the US president has also made his position clear, cutting aid from the country of South Africa and lambasting the government in a number of areas. South Africa, as a major economy in the continent of Africa, has also stood its grounds in a number of areas.
All right. So are you aware, though, of this delegation or perhaps this visit by the former Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor? Are you at all aware about her visit to the United States?
No, Polly, I'm not. As I said, that's the question I responded to yesterday to your Washington correspondent, Simon Marks, and I confirmed with him that I was not aware of the former minister being present in Washington in a capacity that will be representative of the government. No, I'm not.
Yeah. All right. There is concern, though, Mr. Magwenya, that the longer it takes for the South African government to send some people to Washington, the more this administration is going to listen to groupings such as Afriforum/Solidarity, who essentially are just making things a little more uncomfortable for the country there. Is that a concern for the presidency?
No, Polly, when the president does sends a delegation to Washington, number one, it will be a high-level delegation of ministers. They will be drawn from all parties represented within the GNU. They will be ministers who also lead portfolios that are material in the process of our trade as well as our political and diplomatic relationship with the United States. At this stage, it doesn't seem that when that delegation, if that delegation, for example, were to leave tomorrow, it will not be able to meet corresponding counterparts in this regard. So when we say the timing is not ideal, is because of the assessment that has been made by our own ambassador in Washington, as well as the knowledge that we have that in the critical areas of decision-making and influence within the administration that interface with us, or rather that are responsible in what we call African affairs, there are vacancies there. So rushing to send a delegation when they will not be able to meet their counterparts and hold meaningful discussions will be counterproductive at this stage. Having said that, that does not mean that there are no attempts that are being made to reach out to the Trump administration with the purpose of setting the stage and creating what will be a conducive environment to reset the relationship and take the relationship forward from a trade as well as a diplomatic point of view. The president is on record saying he's not going to send a delegation there to explain ourselves. What we would like to do will be to send a delegation to the US when we have a solid trade proposal that we would like to put on the table, a proposal that will be mutually beneficial for both countries. At this stage, that work has not been completed, and therefore it will not be prudent for us to rush sending a delegation there just because others with more nefarious intentions have decided to send delegations which are not legitimately or who were not legitimately representing the government or the people of South Africa.
Yeah.
South Africa, to an extent, has reminded the United States that the current talks on why South Africa is not meeting the demands with regards to its own challenges. A number of experts say that the United States covers just 15% of South Africa's need in terms of support, talking about PEPFAR and a whole lot of issues. These two countries don't see eye to eye in regards to geopolitical issues. Recently, the current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who have always said the foreign policy of the United States will be in the interest of the United States of America. I wonder how that's going to work in the continent of Africa. Marco Rubio refused to attend the G20 of foreign ministers in South Africa. He was met with a lot of criticism globally, especially from the continent of Africa. However, the South African officials have said if they are ready to send a delegation to the United States, it will be based on them planning carefully. At some point, they will talk. However, they won't rush. They want to make sure that based on their communication from Washington and their ambassadors who are located in the United States have given them intelligence or information that the current administration of the United States is not properly fixed. When I talk about fixed, is that not everyone has been appointed to that particular position. So it will be difficult for their South African counterpart to really meet and talk on strategic issues. There are billions of US dollars at stake, and South Africa has made its position clear. It will be non-aligned. It still believes on its ICC case regards to Israel, and South Africa will not waive.
Very interesting words that you have just used there, Mr. Magwenya, and they almost seem to dovetail with what the president's national security advisor, who was talking to the Sunday Times, seemed to suggest, and that is that perhaps there is no need for South Africa to go and explain itself and its policies to Washington. I'm beginning to wonder whether President Ramaphosa, whether there will ever come a time where President Ramaphosa meets with his U.S. counterpart. Do you think there is reticence in that regard?
Well, Xoli, first of all, some of the sentiments that are being attributed to the National Security Advisor are not entirely accurate with respect to the absence of appetite to engage with the Trump administration through a delegation. As I've said, it's a question of timing. More directly with respect to your question, invariably, Xoli, there will be a discussion between President Ramaphosa and President Trump at some point. There will be discussions at higher levels of leadership from both countries with respect to what we continue to see as a strategic relationship between the US and South Africa. You will also note, Xoli, that we form part of the troika of the G20 together with the United States. South Africa will hand over the presidency of the G20 to the United States. And in that regard, there will be engagements with respect to that process. There is no way that we're not going to talk to each other. The US is South Africa's largest trading partner. South Africa is the US's largest African importer of its goods. So at some point, there will be conversation. We are observing with some concern the unfortunate megaphone diplomacy issues being tackled via social media channels, often or mostly laced with misinformation and untruths. Be that as it may, we remain steadfast that we are committed in this relationship, and we will do our best to ensure that we remain in the relationship in a manner that serves our economic interest, but also in a manner that is characterized by mutual respect and respect for our independence as a country as well as our sovereignty.
The South African government has come out to disprove or to argue against the current accusation from the United States of America talking about land expropriation. The country has taken its own position, but again, they have reiterated that disinformation is not what the country will tolerate. And that's why we saw Mr. Lamola, the foreign minister, came out clear and also pointed out that South Africa, to an extent, will not waver because the country has its own strategic position, and that foreign interference is not allowed or will not be tolerated. As we all have seen, what Germany came out clear and reminded the United States that despite you are a strategic partner, you do not have the right to interfere in our internal issues. All of these are problems that the continent of Africa have been experiencing for decades. Now we see Egypt and South Africa are facing the heat. It is important that South Africa is a major player in terms of the global south and more importantly a member of BRICS. South Africa also benefits from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which the US also has a number of benefits that you will never hear them talking about.
Final question to you, sir, and briefly if you can. South Africa's long-standing relationship with Russia, that basically stands, but there does appear to be warming of relations between the US and Russia. You said earlier you will continue using channels, various channels, to try and warm these relations. Might Russia be one of those?
No, only we have our own bilateral relationship with Russia, which has its own characteristic, sort of historical features to it. With respect to the United States, look, with any other diplomatic situation or standoff in this regard, you always have a number of options at your disposal, including what we call backdoor channels. We do indeed have those backdoor channels to various decision makers in the United States, including President Trump. And as I've said to you, in the absence of a delegation going to the United States does not equate to the absence of attempts on our part to make sure that we do the best we can to find ways to reset this relationship and restore its strategic and mutually beneficial importance. So we'll continue doing that. But for your comfort, we have our own backdoor channels that we are utilizing. And at the right time or an appropriate time, you will see all these efforts coming to fruition, and we remain hopeful that the megaphone sort of diplomatic noise that we currently are subjected to will subside, and we will be able to have something tangible on the table that we can engage over with our U.S. counterparts, and that more importantly will be very much focused on a trade deal, as well as other issues that are of mutual interest between the two countries.
And when is it that South Africa is going to receive President Zelensky? The Ukrainian leader is going to land in South Africa. When might that be?
Okay, Kole, that will be on the 10th of April. And that visit, as we have said, is a culmination of a number of engagements that President Ramaphosa has held with both President Zelensky and President Putin with respect to supporting both warring parties to finding a path to peace, which President Ramaphosa has always been consistent in saying it's a path through dialogue. It's a war that will never be won militarily. We are, in fact, pleased that the Trump administration is aligned to our position in this regard, that there ought to be negotiations with respect to resolving that conflict. We believe that those negotiations must be inclusive. They must accommodate and include all parties that are impacted by that conflict, and they must be negotiations that will set that part of the world on a lasting pace.
Vincent Makwenya, thank you very much for that confirmation. So the 10th of April, that will be the day that President Zelensky lands on South African shores, and it's all part of South Africa's effort to try and bring these warring parties to one table.
It is important that the South African government came under pressure when the United States senators and congressmen wrote to former President Joe Biden and to the current President Donald Trump asking the government to take out South Africa from the current AGOA trade and opportunities in terms of their bilateral collaboration. This particular approach to the country of South Africa is being observed across the continent of Africa very closely. I hope the United States and South Africa will figure out how they move ahead with this relationship, because at this time, the continent of Africa is making strategic choices and selecting its partners that will be for win-win. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know in the comment section what you think regards to this particular situation. If South Africa should send a delegation to the United States to explain itself, or they should meet in the negotiation table to talk about very important aspect that will drive this relationship forward. For now, I will be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.